Hello, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Especially to those of you like me who sometimes need the reminder it's not too late. Stop what you're doing. Go out and buy some flowers. Make a reservation, etc., etc. For those for whom it applies, I saw you there, Andy. I've been there, man. Hey, Brett. Long time no talk. It's been, what, 20 minutes? 30 minutes? Good to see everyone. I'll get to all the questions in sequence in just a minute. First, I'll answer Martin's question I just saw there. Martin was asking about the cover photo. That is a photo I took yesterday during a very bright sunny day, though with black and white. Can't quite tell when it is, though. The sun is right there. That is the old Mid-South Coliseum, which is the used to be, hasn't been going for quite some time now, the place to see concerts here. You know, the Beatles played there. That's where the KKK protested the Beatles during the Bigger Than Jesus thing. And, everyone has played there. I used to take the bus, the 7th and 8th grade, down the street past there. And there used to be a big billboard talking about all the bands that were going to be there. You know, Van Halen on the 84 tour. The Police, Synchronicity, I did see them there on that tour. Foreigner, every big band. Billy Squier was coming to town. Everyone played there. And I didn't get to see most of those concerts during the time I was on that bus in 7th and 8th grade, but I just imagined it was just this fantastic world that I was not allowed into. But eventually they let me in, and I saw the Police there on Synchronicity. I saw REM on the Green tour. I saw NXS on the Kick tour. I saw Rush like 4 or 5 times there. ZZ Top even I went once. Great venue. Robert Plant. I think I saw Plant and Page there. Yeah, I saw Plant and Page there on the first tour, the good tour they did when they had Porl from the Cure playing with them. And it since they built the FedEx Forum downtown, no one is using the Mid-South Coliseum and asbestos and stuff, but it's still there, and it looks like a big flying saucer has just landed in the middle of town, and made for some good photos. Let me break my own rules real quick. Usually I try to keep this stuff just about the amps. Hey, Keith. Hey, everyone. But I'll certainly call out Keith. Make this big and show you guys a different view of the Mid-South Coliseum that I also took yesterday morning. So this won't take but a second. There we go. So that's the Mid-South Coliseum as it appears to our eyes. Oops, wrong button. Sorry. Most of the time. And I was trying to make it look like a postcard you might get from the 1960s with the colors. That's all in camera, nothing done in post, which won't mean anything to most of you, but to some of you, it does. Crazy people like me. Anyway, good to see everyone here, and I'll get started on the other questions very soon, I promise. But on this day of all days, well, first let me tell you what I've got planned for Nikki, because she doesn't watch these streams, and she can't hear what I'm saying. So Nikki is a huge Alanis Morissette fan. Huge, huge, huge. And the other day I was doing a photo walk over by where one of the theaters is in town, and I saw that Jagged Little Pill, the musical, was in town. I had no idea if it's any good or not, but I got us tickets. I got us good tickets for that tonight, and I'm going to surprise her with that. So, still got it. Hopefully the show's good. She will really enjoy that, and I will get many, many husband points. But I do have a relationship question for you. So when I'm working on amps and stuff, when I'm not actively making a video, I watch old shows, and so I've been doing rewatches. And what happens is I started to rewatch The X-Files. And then one night when she was making dinner wasn't ready yet, I was finishing up one of the episodes of The X-Files. Hey, Brad, in the living room. And she walked in, she's like, oh, X-Files, I love this. And so for the next 3 weeks, we were watching X-Files. And so I couldn't watch X-Files without her anymore. So the show that I had been watching while working now became our show, which meant that I couldn't keep watching it at the bench. So I switched over to Justified. The same thing happened. So I've lost X-Files, I've lost Justified. I'm watching The Sopranos now. Rewatching The Sopranos. But do you guys have, besides just being sneaky squirrel and not saying what I'm doing or lying about it, it's very frustrating. always I find a show, I'm going to do this, and then it becomes our show, then I can't watch it without her. I tried to find Battlestar Galactica, the early 2000s version, not the 78 thing, but that's not streaming anywhere, which maketh me sad. So say we all. Anyway, hey, Keith and I'm sorry, Keith, I can't remember your beloved's name. Actually, it's a beautiful name. I want to say Morgan, but it's not that. But you guys are watching X-Files too. Very good. But Sopranos is great, of course, duh. And I rewatched Deadwood earlier in the year. I do watch new things, and not just hitting the greatest hits from the past 20 years. But when I'm working, I need to have something where my attention can mostly be on what I'm doing. And so if something that I already know, Battlestar Galactica, Deadwood, The Sopranos, X-Files, Buffy, even Doctor Who, then I know what's happening, and my attention can be on the amp, but some part of my brain is distracted, and I get less antsy sitting at the bench all day. Anyway, Keith, you don't have to put your Ronan, yeah. Sorry about that. I know these things, but the names escape me at the time. I never quite have the words I need at the moment that I need them. I have many, many staircase moments. All right, as always, a couple of things to mention for those of you who are new here. Please only ask any one question the once. I will get to it. If you ask a question and I haven't answered it, it means I haven't answered it yet, so please don't ask it multiple times. And putting the question marks in front of the question does help me see them in the chat. If you forget, don't repost the question with the question marks, just, because then it's multiple times, and I think I've lost my place in the scrolling section of Doom. As Brad and Keith know very well, when you're doing this, and if the chat scrolls and you don't know it, you're like, oh, where was I? Oh my God. And you see something for the second time, you think, okay, I've scrolled back up too far. No, you're back to where it was. Anyway, with all that said, let's get started with everyone's questions. The first ones are always out of sequence, and then after about 5 or 6 questions, they'll be in the order they were asked. Did Amnesia, hey man, JTM45 500 millivolt fuse went out when powered on, or a milliamp, by the way. Not trying to correct you, just for clarity's sake, milliamp, not millivolt. When powered on, replaced, amp plays fine again. Anything I should check or replace? GZ34 on last legs, house has stable power. Usually, when a fuse blows, that's a sign of a fault. But what can happen, particularly with a slow blow fuse, is that there'll be something that is drawing quite a bit of current usually at the time the amp is powered on, or taken out of standby if you have a rectifier tube. And it's not enough to trip the fuse. It doesn't break the filament in the fuse, but it's enough to slightly degrade the filament. And that builds up and builds up and builds up, and the slow blow eventually blows. You replace it with another slow blow, everything works fine, but there means that there is some condition in that amp which is kind of eating away at that fuse. And it can be just the shock of having a standby switch, using standby if you have a rectifier tube. If it's a fast blow, take it to a tech. A fast blow fuse should not blow under normal operation, but if a slow blow can eventually blow, and the only thing wrong with the amp is it needs a new fuse. So if it's blowing fast blows, or it blows it again 2 weeks from now, take your amp to a tech. But there's a possibility that you won't need anything else done to that amp for a year or two or more. But if you have an amp with standby and you have a rectifier tube, you don't need to use a standby. There are a few exceptions, but they're very few and far between. What tube type do I like for V1 and 5E3? Stock AY12AY7 or something else? Hey, let's Ghost. It depends on what amount of headroom you want. The amp sounds great with the 12Y3. The amp sounds great with more gain with the 12AX7. Either one is safe. It is just a matter of a personal taste. You won't hurt a thing. Whatever works for you, works for you. I tend to like a 12AY7, but I don't mind a 12AX. Yeah, Brad makes a good point. If you have a fast blow fuse, for the HD fuse. You may have false failures. Make sure you have a slow blow. A slow blow will usually say TL or T, which means time delay. Hey, Grateful Sam, want to make a 20-foot extension cable for my 2x12 speaker cabinet I use with my twin. What gauge wire do I recommend? Well, you're very welcome, Sam. I would use 16 gauge for that because there was no chance that it'll ever degrade the signal with 20 feet. You could use 18 gauge for 20 feet. But the 16 gauge cable is inherently more rugged, will have a thicker jacket, typically if you buy a good quality cable. And you don't want to use larger than 14 gauge. Because it's really hard to fit in the terminals on a standard switchcraft plug. But 16 gauge should be what I recommend. 14 if you want to go overkill. Hopefully I said 16 gauge at the beginning, not 14 gauge. I don't remember what I just said. 16 gauge would be my choice for that. 14 gauge if you want a bit of overkill, but beyond that, you're not gonna get any real benefit from 14 over 16 with a twin and only 20 feet. Let's see to do. Hey, VR6Mick or whatever. Sorry, some of the usernames are unpronounceable. Vendor Pro Junior, looks like the previous owner put a 12A-Y7 V2 for some reason. Any idea what they may have been trying with that? 12AX7 is in V1 like stock. In V1 is a thing of stopping the round. You can play around. Neither one will hurt the amp. You can use a 12AY, you can use a 12AX, you can use a 5751. You don't want to use an AT or an AU there, but they were trying to lower the gain in the amp and change the response. Play around with it if you like. All 12AYs or all 12AX7s, whatever. There's no wrong answer there. It's all subjective, and it'll be safe. Hey, again, in my first 18 months of guitar, 6 of 10 tube amps have needed a fuse or tube or maintenance. Is this normal? And thank you for adding to our collective enthusiasm. Well, I've never been accused of making people enthusiastic about anything, but if that's your take on it, okay, it's a free country. It's not abnormal, but it's not ideal. But depending on the level of maintenance that they receive, hopefully afterwards they won't need any further maintenance for quite some time. A lot of amps have been abused and never maintained, and so you get an amp that you don't even know it's on its last legs, because you look at, if you buy a used amp, it's not like anyone that's ever has, hey, here's the detailed service records and here's all the photos of the insides. And so you get it, and it may work pretty well, and after a while it begins to show a problem. It's not an inherent problem of tube amps. It is an inherent problem with anything that people make. And the same thing could happen with the solid-state amp. Same thing could happen with the acoustic guitar. Hey, I left it out on the stand, and all of a sudden I've got a crack in it. Well, your humidity was wrong in your house, etc. Everything is possible to fail, and everything needs some degree or level of maintenance. But tube amps, good quality tube amps, I'm not going to say like the $100 stuff you get on Amazon or Temu is going to be up to it, but and I'm not going to say Blues Junior is up to it, but a good quality tube amp, it doesn't have to be an expensive one to be good quality, won't need extreme maintenance, but it will need occasional maintenance. Robbie F., watching this from the future. Thank you for making it, and I hope you're having a great day with your family. Victor, aloha, framing his bungalow. I hope that's a euphemism. Thank you, Pele Pele Pew. That's a fun name. Hey, Andrew Henderson, thanks for joining us. Looking for good espresso recommendation. I'm not the right person to ask. Is there anything that should be done to an ultralinear super reverb outside of the basic safety upgrades? Well, make sure that all the electrolytics are relatively new, like 15 years old or younger. Make sure everything's, and all the solder joints are good. If someone had said, hey, I've got ultralinear twin, what's the works? Well, for me, the works on an ultralinear twin would be de-waxing the board where the especially where a DC buildup is measured where it should not be. Shortening and neatening up the lead dress. You can see that in my video on the 69 Deluxe Reverb last week. Same thing. That was a 69. Same thing goes for a late 70s ultralinear Fender or any of the post 69 amps where the lead dress needs to be cleaned up. I would change the input coupling cap on the phase inverter from a 10 nanofarad to a 3.3 nanofarad. If the master volume, if your amp has a master volume, I believe the ultralinear twins all did. If it has a bright cap, lift one end of the bright cap so it's not in circuit. Don't use the pull boost if that amp has that. And if your amp, like many twins, has a heater balance pot, have a tech disconnect the heater balance pot because they are a common source of catastrophic failure, and replace it with two very inexpensive half-watt resistors. But beyond that, an ultralinear twin is a really good sounding amp. Make sure that the baffle, the hardware holding the speakers to the baffle is tight, because if that's loose and the speaker is moving like this, over time it'll destroy that baffle. And those baffles are hard to change out. Love the t-shirt. Stax Museum of American Soul Music is fantastic. If you ever make it to Memphis, go to the Stax Museum. It's not just on Stax's music. It's on gospel, it's on Motown, it's on R&B in general, everything including disco to early hip-hop. It's just phenomenal. Do I vent solder smoke to prevent breathing it? No, I have a fan going, but I don't vent it. Brad vents it, but yeah, I figured I'm already too far gone. Yeah, I grabbed the telly today. I like to change it up a little bit. Maybe I'll grab one of the Strats later in the stream. Oh, by the way, the amp that you're hearing there, that's that 64 Deluxe Reverb. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do a dedicated playing video on it, but it sounds nice. Holy cow. Holy cow. I got to scroll down for this one. Sorry. Michael, you just went above and beyond. And I usually do the super chats in the order they come in. But when someone drops a bomb like that on me, wow, Michael, thank you very much. You finished your AB763 twin build after the squeal incident last week. Good. Hey, you've been there. You have now done that. We have all done that. Brad knows exactly what I'm talking about. And you probably won't do that again because it's awful. In Surf Green Tolex, and you enjoyed the grounding video. Very good. The Bender Surfman Reverb. Well, tell you what, man. I don't care if you do it with your phone. I don't care if you do it on Facebook or Instagram or you're on YouTube or whatever. Or just send me or email me a link. I want to hear you playing that amp, man. Thank you very much. Congratulations. And that is extraordinarily generous of you. Thank you, Michael. Let's see. Where were we now? Now I got to get back up to where I was because I'd jumped down. But, man, 100 euros. That's quite the gift. Speaking of quite the gift, I'll get there when I get to his comment in just a minute. But we have another very generous member of the channel. And maybe I'll embarrass him in front of everyone in just a moment. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Here he is, Mr. Colby Jack. Hello, cheese and amp lovers worldwide. Now, after all the stuff that I went through the past couple weeks, where I had the bad Motu M2 and did some test streams to get to narrow it down, and Derek, Mr. Colby Jack there was very helpful with that. He's one of many who were very helpful with the troubleshooting. I replaced it with a new Moto M2, and I mentioned that later I wanted to get something with 4 mic pre's. Well, this mother humper sent me a Moto M6, which I am using, and you're hearing. And so I have this microphone in input 1. I've got the bench mic in input 2. I've got the Royer in input 3. I've got an SM57 input 4. You're not hearing the SM57 right now because I didn't have time to do the time alignment and get the phase perfect. And the deluxe reverb with the Royer, that sounds good. Then I've got digital inputs on inputs 5 and 6. So if I were to use the HX Stomp or the Tone X or whatever for a low key kind of thing, and it is so nice because now I could have 2 mics on an amp at once. I could have 2 amps with 2 different mics on them. And I have a lot of possibilities I've never had before, and that is all thanks to Mr. Colby Jack. So any time in the future that my audio goes above and beyond, it is to his credit. It is his gift that to me and to you and to the channel for furthering the search for better audio. And it is extremely generous of him to have done so. And I told him not to. I argued against it. He overruled me. And I grudgingly accepted his fantastic gift. And thank you very much. Let's see. Hey, RS, I can't do numbers. Hey, man, got scratchy volume pots in my guitars and using my 66 champ most likely causes and fixes. Thank you. Well, if it's only with the champ, then you've got DC on your input. And that can be just a bad tube in V1. Some preamp tubes leak DC on their grid no matter what you do. If it's not that, either it can be, the places I would usually look would be DC leak. If you have an older champ where the 68Ks are on the board, that can build up there. Usually on a 66 champ, the input jack, 68Ks are at the input jack. It could be a bad 68K resistor. It could be a bad 1 meg at the input jack. Or it could be a bad cathode resistor or rarely a faulty cathode bypass cap. It's usually going to be one of those. In worst case scenario, you could have a conductive path that's formed either through a defective tube socket or your tube socket would be dirty. So what I would do first is just change it, use a different 12AX7 in V1, see if the problem goes away. If not, take it to a tech because it'd be a very simple, inexpensive thing. Or if you're comfortable doing it yourself, I would change out the 68K resistors and the 1 meg resistor on the input jack and make sure the input jack contacts all the metal surface contacts from the jack to the chassis are clean and then very tight. All the solder joints there are good. And after that, I would replace the 1.5K cathode resistor on V1. And depending on when the amp was last recapped, maybe change out that 22 or 25 megafarad cathode bypass cap at the same time, because it's usually a sign that if the tube is not physically faulty and the jack is not filthy, it's a sign that the tube is not biasing correctly and DC is being emitted from the grid, which is pin 2 in this case. Hey, Torg. Hey, Tor. Got a 5E3 kit. You built it. Was working great. Just this morning, I noticed bad rattle. I assume it was chassis rattle, but now the low inputs on both channels has stopped working. The low inputs on both channels has stopped working. Huh. As in you don't get any signal at all? Or is it that it's the same level as the high gain? I'm looking at the current stuff here. But I'm thinking, could just be a bad solder joint. The way the low gain inputs work on that is that the input signal goes into the jack, into a 68K resistor, and to the grid, and also to a 68K resistor to the input of the other jack. And since nothing's plugged into the other jack, it's at ground. So you have 60K input, 68K to ground, and that 68K to ground is in parallel with the volume pot on your guitar. So if you don't have signal in that situation, either have a bad solder joint, which is more likely than not, or that 68K resistor is faulty. If you just built it, it's very unlikely that 68K resistor is bad. You probably had a not great solder joint on both input jacks, and that's the issue. It's almost the only thing it could be. And if you had rattle, maybe you were hearing that resistor make and break contact as the amp vibrated from playing, because when you're in the high gain input, your signal goes to a 68K resistor on one jack and the 68K resistor on the other jack, which puts you at 34K. And you have 1 meg to ground before that, so you don't have any attenuation there. But if that was going between 68K and 34K as that resistor is making and breaking contact from vibration, you could have been hearing that as rattle. But either that or you just have a very loose input jack somewhere. But make sure that like I have these. Sometimes a plug won't go all the way into a jack for various reasons. Make sure the jack is not physically the problem. Also, make sure, just in case, make sure the jack says Switchcraft. There are a lot of Switchcraft style jacks out there that are absolutely garbage. Make sure it's an actual Switchcraft 12A. Hey TC, what's my opinion of using a Celestian Blue and G12H Heritage with the Vox AC15 head and a Plexi style head? Depending on the wattage of the Plexi style head, you may lose the blue, and depending on the wattage, you could lose the Heritage as well. G12H is 30 watt speaker. But used with an AC15 and say a 20 watt Plexi style head, let's go with Plexi style, you'll be absolutely fine. It should be one possible really good color. All right, 20 watt, you should be fine. And if you like the sound, it's the right choice. If you don't like the sound, it's the wrong choice. But technically, it is safe and appropriate. If you get a lot of rattle, it could be the tubes, it could be other solder joints, which are not great. When you build a kit, I use this little black plastic one. Let me see if you block my eyes so you can see it. But you can use a wooden pencil. Don't use the graphite part. Don't have a sharpened pencil. You can use a wooden chopstick, a plastic chopstick, a wooden spoon from the kitchen, whatever. Go through your amp, tap on every component, tap on the board, tug on every wire while the amp is on, and you will often find bad solder joints that way. Just putting a little tension on every little thing as you go, one at a time. So work from the input jack to the very last wire of the amp. And if you don't find one and then stop, find one and then keep going, but make a note of each one. You may find only one thing, you may find 7 things. But when you build a kit and you've not done this a million times, you will have made a mistake. You will have. I'm not saying that because of you. I'm saying that because that's the human condition. Let's see. How many people can that stadium hold? I don't know. It was a lot. 20,000 maybe, 25,000. It's a big stadium. You could see it from the picture that I put up on the chat. You can't see it you can't tell the size from the thumbnail photo. It's not huge by modern standards, but it was a fun place. I don't have any opinions of the Sun reboot. I know there's it was coming back, it wasn't, it was coming back, it wasn't. I don't know what's going on with it. I've never really enjoyed Sun amps from any era, so I'm not that interested. Hey, Victor, yeah, that's right. Victor was in the Navy, I take it, because you were in Millington. And you saw Kiss at the Mid-South Coliseum with AC/DC opening up, and you saw Skinner there. There you go, man. Well, you know exactly what it was like back in the day, Victor. Alanis was amazing at Glastonbury last summer. Very nice. It was funny. We were going from London to Oxford a year ago in August when we were there. And as we were going from London to Oxford, we go through Reading. and I saw that they were setting up for the Reading Festival, which is another big music festival, not as big as Glastonbury, but it's quite a thing. And I almost like, stop the train, we're going here. But we had things we had to do in Oxford. She was there to speak at a conference, but I was like, what are the odds I was there that particular weekend? Oh, well, I'm glad to have contributed something. Which look, the E major pentatonic thing that I do, it's just a easy way for me to see what the frequency response of the entire amp is. For those of you wondering what I'm talking about, we put the E back to E. When I first started doing the channel, I didn't even realize how often I played this, but people started calling it the lick. It's just a way for me to test the lows, the mids, and the highs all at once. If you have ghosting, you'll hear that. If you have a lack of lows, you'll hear that. If the highs are too much or too, yeah, I do it in E flat as well. The Sunburst Strat, the EJ Strat's permanently in E flat. All my other guitars are in standard. And I didn't even realize how often I played it. And people, you know, for some people it's Yellow Ledbetter. For some people it's Don't Let Me Down. It's other people it's Allman Brothers. It's just C major pentatonic, and it falls to hand really easy. I'm not thinking about playing most of the time when I'm doing this stuff. I'm thinking about what is the amp doing as I do different things. That's my job. My job is not to wow you with my chops, which I'm really glad that's not my job. For those of you new to the channel, I had a wood planer incident when I was about 21, 22, and I've got severe nerve damage. So I remember how to do all that. Cannot do it anymore, but I know how amps work, and that's what I do. Don't get Steve Vai to fix your amps. Don't get me to play on your album. Hey, Rocket Maths, in my Super Reverb mains, I've got neutral straight to primary, good. AC receptacle skipped completely, and live to switch to fuse tip to other power transformer primary. Earth on power transformer bolt. Assume needs redoing. Yeah, all right. So your neutral straight to the primary is fine, but you want to bring your hot to the inner connector of the fuse, and from the I think of it as the ring connector, the one closer to the chassis of the fuse holder, to the power switch, and then on the other side of the power switch is the other primary, and you want to have the earth either on a dedicated screw, a machine screw with hardware to the chassis, or soldered to the chassis. If you have a reissue, you would want it to bring it to a solder. Well, actually, on the reissue, it's already to a dedicated ground point. So I assume you're talking about one of the old ones. I usually solder to the chassis because that's how Fender did it back in the day, and I don't like to drill the chassis if I don't have to. But on a new amp or an amp with an aluminum chassis, I will drill a hole. In this case, for a number 6x32 screw US, I would use a 9/64 bit and do that. But you know, I guess that's equivalent of like an M3 or M4. For you crazy people who use logical systems of measurement, Roman. Sorry, I said Ronin earlier. I didn't care for Sandman, Keith. Sorry. Nikki's a big Neil Gaiman fan. I think Neil Gaiman has really good ideas, but no good execution. His ideas are great, but his execution remains at comic book level, and so I didn't care for Sandman. I've heard good things about the Fallout, but the premise doesn't appeal to me. The same for Last of Us. Start watching the Honeymooners. I don't know if you can find the Honeymooners streaming anywhere. Has anyone asked my opinion on the Varellin Octal yet? Is it transistor based? I have no idea what the Varellin Octal is. I assume that is one of those very expensive overdrive pedals, but I have no experience with any of their stuff. I actually do have, I've had her watch parts of your videos before just to get a sense of why we're buds, man. She thinks you're a hoot. You know, I'm not going to say the word on my live stream, but there is a word that we do not use in America because it is horribly derogatory towards women. That's very, very common in Australia and very, very common with the Scots. But in America, that C word is a huge bomb to drop. You don't use that thoughtlessly. And so long after we knew each other, and she knew that my sense of humor and also my attitude towards women, and that is not a word that I use. One night she was hangry, and she was being really irrational. This kind of thing she's going to obviously apologize about. And, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll talk about this in a little bit. Because, you know, when you live with someone, and about 10 minutes later she came back, she said, I'm sorry, I don't know idea why I said that. That was really unfair of me. I said, that's okay. And she laughed. She laughed for like 30 minutes because I had never used that word in her presence before, let alone directed at her. And it was totally tongue-in-cheek. And I know in Scotland and in Australia it is not a gender thing. It is not a derogatory thing. Here it is specifically a gender thing. But about 6 weeks ago, the same kind of situation happened, and I used the same word bomb. And she laughed and laughed, and I said, every time I say that, an Australian gets his wings. And then she laughed harder because she was thinking of you, Brad. Yeah, X-Files is real hit and miss. The hits are good. The misses are wild swings. It holds up better for me than Twin Peaks does, but you know, I will always have a thing for Dana Scully's. So. But yeah, they mystery boxed themselves into a lot of holes I couldn't get out of. Been getting into hi-fi sound systems and wonder if I've ever heard of a two-way cab system for guitar. People have played around with it. It's not necessary, and you really don't want to hear anything above 5K out of a guitar amp. It's painful, awful stuff. There's, you know, that's the stuff that makes guitar sound terrible. But you want that for reproduction of the air with cymbals. You know, hi-fi is audio reproduction is very different than audio production. And with guitar amps, we're doing audio production, and we want the playback system, the reproduction system, to present every bit of the nuance of what was recorded, but you don't want that in audio production when it comes to guitar. It will, if you want proof of that, stand in front of a Hartke 4x10 with a aluminum tweeter while someone slaps bass with their treble cranked on the bass. And if you ever hear again, you'll be like, I hate tweeters, and I don't want 10K coming at me like that ever again. Or you won't hear 10K ever again. You'll think, what's the big deal? A lot of guys out there, a lot of guys watching right now aren't going to hear that. And they may need you to crank the 5K just to hear something. I hear a lot of amps on my channel described as too dark. They're not. Or too bright. They're not. The ones that are too dark, people have lost their hearing. The ones that are too bright, they're listening on their phone, a cheap phone. You know, I know what the amp sound. I know what the audio on my video sounds like because I hear it 3 hours at a time. And I'm here. Every video takes at least an hour to make. Many times I'm hearing it multiple times. I'm very familiar with everything. I don't put anything up, at least not in the last 3 years, where I don't sign off on what it sounds like. And I'm listening to some very good reference monitors. Yeah, man, that eyebrow, Brad. Yeah, Gillian Anderson. And then she comes out. She's, oh, and by the way, I'm really British, and with that accent, and I'm done. I'm just gone, man. Hey, Steve. Yeah, See you, Steve. Appreciate you being here. Don't do crossovers for guitar. MBF carp full. I'm not going to be building amps for a little bit. Thank you though. Let's see. Yeah, Rock Mass. Well, the logic behind it is that you always must fuse the hot, and the fuse must be before the power switch, because you have a faulty power switch. And if the fuse is after the power switch and the power switch shorts the chassis, then you could cause a fire in a house. Now, typically a house is going to have a circuit breaker, its own fuse box, but any device that draws as much current as much power, we'll just sum it up at that, as a guitar amp or a toaster or a refrigerator, is supposed to be independently fused, so you're not putting the house system potentially at risk. So you have to have the fuse before the power switch, because I have seen power switches which short to chassis, which go to ground. Brad has as well. So you have the power switch after the fuse. So if anything's wrong with the power switch, that fuse opens up and your home is protected. In the EU or any other country that uses 240 volt mains, hot and neutral are a little bit different, and then you want to, in which case you preferably will switch both of them on and off, so you have a dual pole power switch. In the US, where we really do have hot and almost nothing, neutral, I'm not going to say that it's ground, but you can almost view it as ground. It gets really complicated. Maybe that's a bad summation, but you only have to switch the hot. If you have a double pole switch, go ahead and switch the hot and neutral as well, because it gives you a handy place to tie the other primary for the neutral. And you want to have the ground have its own dedicated connection to chassis, which will not be shared with anything else. By ground, I mean the safety ground, because if it's on a transformer bolt, transformers eventually cause that bolt to come loose. They just do. They always do. Things vibrate for a decade and they loosen up. And you don't want it shared with anything else. It's one dedicated thing. Its only job is to be your safety ground, that your fail-safe. If anything else fails in the amp, that will still stay good. That's the goal. And there's a reason behind these electrical safety codes, and each reason was a death or pain or dismemberment. So just not dismemberment in the case of electricity, but serious injury can occur. Take it very seriously. I love Keith's videos too. For those of you who don't know Keith at 5 Watt World, get out from underneath your rock. It's a much bigger channel than mine, but yeah, I do love Keith's videos. I have a 5 Watt World coffee mug, but Nikki has stolen it, and I can't steal it back. But also, it's too small for me, and it's just the right size for her. She drinks about a third as much coffee as I do. What is my favorite iteration circuit for a Princeton throughout the years has existed? 64 to 68 Princeton reverb. That's as good as it gets for a Princeton. I don't like the tweed Princeton. I think it's doesn't have any backbone. Doesn't have any. And the brown Princeton's also a little bit on the boring, uninspired side, but the blackface and the silver panel is good too. But if I were to choose, I'd want the black panel versions. So 64 to 60, late 66, early 67. Assuming they were identical price-wise, which would be the better bet between a 65 Deluxe reissue or Mojotone pre-built 65 Deluxe reverb kit for build quality and reliability? I can't answer that. I know that the Fender usually gets it right, but Fender consistently has a few things you need to move off board, as I've shown. I've not tried one of the Mojotone pre-built kits, so it depends on who's building the kit and who's doing the QA. I know that it's much easier to work on the Mojotone kit, but I would have to have one of their direct from them to me amps for me to form an opinion beyond conceptually. Conceptually, the Mojotone is the better, more reliable amp. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know how they did the grounds. I don't know how they did some of the wiring aspects. So conceptually, theirs is better. I know the Fender strengths and weaknesses. I would say that if someone were to ask me, if a client asked me, a pre-existing client, I'd say, get the Mojo Tone because I can fix whatever's wrong with it. You'll have a better amp after that. If they have the 65 reissue, especially since you get a 65 reissue used for a pretty good price, get that. Let me do $150 worth of mods to it and go out and play for 20 years and be happy. They're not hard to work on. Anyone know you can find a schematic for a Mark-based little Mark 250? Brad might have a hookup for you there. I can't speak for him. He's a Mark-based dealer. I had a hard time getting a schematic from that company for a different model. Hey, Chris RT. Yeah, well, Rubicon versus Nishikon is on the face of it, 6-1 half done. Unicon, Kimcon, Rubicon. Pretty much all the Japanese con brands are all very good quality, but within each of those brands are going to be different series of capacitors. So if you're comparing say it's a 85 Celsius rated Nishikon versus 105 degrees Celsius rated Rubicon, the Rubicon's the better cap typically, but there's also there are other factors beyond just the temperature rating. Number of hours is expected to last at X voltage, ripple response, etc. But on the face of it, Rubicon and Nishikon are pretty much interchangeable. I usually go with Nishikon because it just streamlines my Mauser search. If I'm always using Nishikon, I know they're always going to be reliable, but sometimes they won't have a value that I want. I'll use a Rubicon, United Kimcon. They're fine. And hey, Did Amnesia, I think you're behind us in the stream. You're talking about hearing 5 hertz. I think you're like 15 minutes behind. On the screen somewhere, here I'll show it on my iPhone. See, my iPhone there is negative 11 seconds behind the stream. See, it says negative 11, and then it said live in white. If I press that so the live goes red, then it shows live. I was 11 seconds behind. I think you're like 15 minutes behind. But yeah, a lot of people hear 5 kilohertz all the time. Very few of us hear 5 hertz all the time, just the elephants in the room. But Nishikons and Rubicons are both good brands. Sorry. Given the size of wire used to wind pickups, hey Monty, are there reasons why the wiring between the pots and selectors and jacks shouldn't be less than the usual 22 average? Well, pickups are a very special case. There's no... I'm going to try to think of how to answer this. What is the job of the wire in the question? As far as the job of the wire in question, we could wire all our guitars with the same gauge wire, which is like 43 gauge, typically, or around there, depending on the winder. 43 gauge form bar. So I could have that in the pickup, and I have that go into the pots and all that, go into the guitar jack, and it would work just fine. The trouble is, in a guitar, due to vibrations and everything, that wire breaks if you look at it too hard. And so we don't use the 43 gauge wire for our connections in a guitar. We want typically 22 gauge. This is one of the standards because it's really reliable. It's going to be strong. It's going to solder well. It's going to have mechanical strength. It's not going to be stressed. If a pot comes a little bit loose and the pot starts to spin, you're much less likely to break the wire. Whereas the Formvar 43 stuff inside a pickup would snap with a stiff breeze. But in a pickup where it's all wound against itself, and then typically wax, potted, or shellacked, etc., so there's no mechanical stress on the wire itself. You know, it's chosen because of its electrical properties. You can't get enough winds of a 22 gauge wire on a pickup bobbin to get the sound that we want out of that size. The pickup would be this big if we did it with a heavier gauge wire, and it would sound totally different. But, you know, for those of us who've done this for a while, it's very common for that little bitty wire to break where it comes out of the pickup and goes to its little eyelet where it's soldered to the 22 gauge wire to come to the rest of the guitar. And so we've got to unwind one strand of that and then resolder it and hope that we don't break it in the process, because that stuff it's just like a hint of a wire. So electrically, you're absolutely correct. There'd be no benefit to it electrically, though. But mechanically, that would really suck if we used 43 gauge wire for all our connections. Hey, TR Greg, having trouble finding new production half-watt carbon comp resistors at 5% from known sellers? Yeah, they're out of production everywhere. Don't worry about it. Kamaya used to be, and also known as Walson, used to be still in production. 2 years ago, they were still in production. I would get them 200 at a time from Mauser. They're gone. They're not being made anymore. Zycon seems to maybe be the only source that I know of. Tube Depot is where I get carbon comps as I need them, and I've got a stash. Basically, I'm at the point where if I get a 66 fender in, I'll use a carbon comp. If I get a 76 fender in, I'll use a carbon film. I'm saving the carbon comps for amps where it matters, where it's really historically necessary. And, you know, if I need to go to Allen, if the client wants me to use that and I have to go spend $100 for Allen Bradley's to get 3 that work, that's the client's decision. I will also inform the client that I can use carbon film, and no one will really know the difference. But carbon comps are no longer being made, so the remaining stock is going to get more and more expensive. I think it is, when they are available, there are places in certain circuits where they make a very small difference, and you may have about 4 of those places in the circuit total. Cumulatively, it makes a slight difference. Carbon films typically are going to sound pretty much the same. If you want to chase that, you know, what's the best way to put this? It's point of diminishing returns, and it used to be almost theoretical, but now that the cost of quality carbon comps is going to be going up and up and up and up, that point of diminishing returns is going to be exceeded pretty quickly. That last 10% of anything is the most expensive 10%. Hey, Diego. Guten Tag. Hey, Matt there in South Carolina. Hope you guys are ice-free at this point. You bought a Bluesbreaker combo with a master volume. I didn't know they ever made one with a master volume. Make sure the transformers are aligned properly if it's one of the reissues. Other than that, they're nice amps. Hey, Rocket Mass, if you look at almost any of the vintage fenders I have in my vintage fenders playlist, you'll see me doing that same circuit where the hot is fused, then switched, and the neutral is tied to the other primary and the ground. You can see it in the video on the 61 Princeton that came up yesterday or the day before. I show that pretty clearly. It's snowing. Oh, sorry, Mark. We are finally free of the snow. In fact, yesterday, the thumbnail photo, that was our first time to really leave the house in a while. We went for a walk because it was like 70 degrees. I had slightly damp pits at the end of that walk. It was glorious. Maybe more information than you wanted to know. But we keep things real here. Hey, Matt, thoughts on an EF86 V1 tube in a single-channel AC30 top boost design, but as a head only? Too much gain with the top boost cathode follower tone stack, and should you stick with the 12X7? You don't want to do it with the EF86 with the top boost. That'd be way too much gain. You'd hear nothing but and then EF86s are almost completely unreliable at this point. And you can chase that dragon, but there are better ways to get gain these days, I think. I don't know that I'm going to be doing any more EF86s just because the remaining supply is so low of anything that... Most of the stuff that's on the market today for EF86s is yesterday's rejects. And there's a different pentode, 5781. I'm not good with numbers. That was used in a lot of Gibson circuits. That's a better choice for those who need a pentode. You can change it. EF86 circuit to use the other pentode and get very similar results, just a wiring difference. But Cascode is a better way to go, as Brad mentions, but that's more of a build. You don't need a Cascode with a AC30 top boost. If you have the top boost channel, the overdrive pedals, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but deluxe reverb. Deluxe reverb with overdrive pedals. Same thing happens with AC30s. AC30s actually take off even more than a deluxe reverb. Now I had the level set not to get a lot louder when I did that, but yeah, you can get it to really push the amp. I would just do the a good build of the AC30 and choose a couple of boost or overdrive pedals and enjoy, because that's, man, an awful lot of good records were done that way. Hey, Brett, my Stereotone Trainwreck Express with master volume is a presence control that seems to do nothing. Is likely because of how the master volume was implemented and it can't be corrected. Brett, I don't know, but if you're coming, Brett's coming here Monday. If you want to bring that amp along, we can find out. It may be something simple. It may be a matter of, oh, they did this, let's undo that. But I would have to see what they did. Or maybe the presence control's never been hooked up right, or whatever. I can't answer that because if it was a train wreck, I could tell you. But it's a Stereotone, Cherrytone, however that's supposed to be pronounced. Bring it on Monday. We'll find out, and then we'll let everyone know. But yes, it can be corrected. Absolutely, it can. I just don't know what the correction is yet. But I bet it does. I bet it is a case of the master volume being low causes the present circuit to fall apart. And we'll talk about our options when you get here. Brad is recommending for espresso machines an Escobar Office Leva. Okay. Every amp I buy, I take to my tech to provide a full service on. They check and replace any out-of-spec parts and perform a full retube, so the amps start their new life on their best foot. I agree with you. I don't find that all amps always need a full retube, but sometimes they do. And but if you buy a new amp and you can afford to take it to a tech, give it a totally clean bill of health, and you start at a good place, you're going to have a much better experience with that amp over the next 5, 10, 15 years than if you just buy an amp, make sound, let's gig with it. You're kind of asking for it. All right. We are back to where Michael did that big super chat bomb on me, which I very much appreciate, Michael. And we are right at the top of the first hour, so we're going to take our first of 2 intermissions. For those of you new to the stream, I do 3 hours most Saturdays. And because that's kind of a time commitment, I do 2 7-minute intermissions. Lets me go to the special room in the back as I need to. Lets me get more coffee, etc. Lets people get sandwiches. Anything you need to do now, and we'll see you all back in 7 minutes. I get people asking me if I'm Uncle Doug. I get people asking me if I'm trying to be Uncle Doug. And the main way you can tell us apart is I have and use a tuner. Love me some Uncle Doug, wish he'd tune his damn guitar. But with the weather changing, crazy, this thing was no kind of tune. Almost there. Close enough for rock and roll or whatever this is. My accent is not Texan in the slightest, thank you very much. But thank you for knowing the difference, Diego. It's like, it's like telling an Austrian he sounds German. Let's see. Where were we? I like Friedman. Yeah. Are they my choice for a current production modded Marshall? They're one of my choices. And how do you think they compare to the current reissue 87X? Better, much better. The reissues got issues with, typically the Marshall reissues have got issues with their transformers over time. Hopefully they'll fix that, but I don't think they will. And the small versions of their reissues have crappy little plastic pots that often are causes of no sound. But yeah, Marshall's not making anything that competes with Friedman or Sir or Gemino. They just have the logo. Where do I get my coffee? Usually Kroger, sometimes Super Low, sometimes Cash Saver, but usually Kroger. Pshaw. Actually, with this 335, I'm going to turn the treble from 5.5 to 6.5. And again, this is that 64 Deluxe Reverb with the original speaker. I think the speaker has been reconed. G major 7 in the comments the other day. I guess it was yesterday. Yeah. Total page move. That's why you got to do the... You can't see it, but I'm giving the dragon pants kicks too. Guitar face for free. That guitar has Gomer Pyle voice in middle position. What the fuck, man? I'm not hearing it. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Surprise, you know who Gomer Pyle it was. I haven't heard anyone reference Gomer Pyle in a really long time. Michael, is very kind of you. And man, if we ever get a chance to meet in person, I don't think anyone can afford that first. Well, the first round you can afford, but subsequent rounds. Haven't gotten the eye exam yet, Bill. I do plan on it. I plan on it pretty soon, but it's been a hectic week. Had some other stuff happen that's beyond the scope of the channel, but not anything to me. Just stuff in the family. Anyone have a tried and true recommendation for a good diesel Billy to me guitar plus amp combo? I don't know what the question is. Telly into Princeton Reverb or Deluxe Reverb. I don't know who a diesel tone Diesel Diesel Billy. I've never heard of that. I assume it's some kind of aggressive country kind of Americana thing. But if you can't do that with a Telly into a Deluxe Reverb, then try a Telly into a Vibrolux Reverb. One of those ought to do Diesel Billy. Who the fuck is Gomer Pyle? Seriously. Don't say whatever, boomer. I'm not a boomer. And Brad is far from a boomer. He knows Gomer Pyle. I'm not going to say that it's really the height of cultural awareness to know Gomer Pyle, but it was a terrible spinoff of the Andy Griffith Show back in the 60s. Not a very good show. But it was on in reruns every afternoon, so we all know it here. I'm Gen X, motherfuckers, not a boomer. Thank you very much. SP12B. I'm not sure. I've never used those speakers, Joachim. So I can't tell you. Sorry, I don't know everything about everything. I know what I know. And that's not one of them. Now I've got that song in my head. I had Diamonds in the Sole of Her Shoes stuck in my head last week. I played that out of nowhere in one of the videos. It was just there. I don't think I've ever learned I Know What I Know. I think I don't have an accordion. Hey, Bottom Kitchen. JMI AC30. I discovered a 15 nanofarad cap, WEMA cap in C3. Schematic indicates it should be 500 picofarad, which shouldn't be a WEMA, right? This is a problem that should be corrected. What's C3's function? Let me get this schematic. So I'll make sure that we're talking about the same cap. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. I don't have anything against boomers, but I'm not one of them. My mom's a boomer. And she's a lovely person. Does not know how to program a VCR to save her life, but she's a lovely person. So C3, 500 picofarad. All right, that's a bright cap on the bright input. And you've got a 15 nanofarad. We'll get up the AC30 base. See if they change that. All right, C3 on the base version would be a 1 nanofarad, so 1,000 picofarad. You got a 15 nanofarad. Are you sure about that? Should not be any kind of 15 nanofarad film cap. It should be a ceramic 500 picofarad for the treble and normal versions, and 1,000 picofarad 1 nanofarad, which could be film for the base version. But someone has changed that out, and they probably just have one laying around. What are the best Telly pickups? Of the ones that we can buy, there's no one answer, because some people are going to love Lawlers, some people are going to love Fralin, some people are going to love Duncan's, and whatever works for you, works for you. The best ones are the ones that Roy Buchanan had in his old Telly, but we can't buy those. So I want twangy classic sound that sounds good with pedals, single coils. I've got some videos on the channel showing the Murrays that I have against the Lawlers that my buddy Steve has, and they both sound great against some Mojitone quiet coils. Not going to use those again. The Fender, I can't remember which Fenders they were, that I thought sounded kind of thin in comparison. But it's not just the pickups, it's also going to depend on the bridge. both Steve's Telly and my Telly have vintage style bridges with brass saddles. If you have one of the modern 6-saddle bridges, which is heavier bridge, you won't get that same twang. If you have the steel saddles from the mid-60s, you're going to have a much bigger, brighter attack than you get with these. So it's not just the pickup, it's the whole guitar working together. For more on that, much more on that, check out my buddy Zach Child's channel, Ask Zach, because he has entire videos on these subjects, and there are a lot of really good pickups out there in the world. But as to which ones are the best, there's no such thing as which ones are right for you. I cannot answer that. I will say that if you're a Telly player and you play my Telly with these Murrays, or you play my buddy Steve's Telly with the Lawlers, or you play someone else's with Fralins, and if you can't get a good sound out of that, you're not a Telly player. They're all going to be slightly different things, but yeah. Your dad was stationed in Millington. Okay. Lived there in 67, 68. So you could have gone to see concerts at the Mid-South Coliseum if you were old enough. I don't know how old you were when your dad was stationed there. But I'm glad you survived your time in Millington. Not everyone does. It is a depressing kind of place. If anyone watching this from Millington has issue with that, come on down to Memphis, and I'll show you where we have actual things to do and besides drink, shoot BB guns. Anyway, sorry, I'm not a big fan of Millington. I had to work there for a year and a half. I was doing work on the naval base there for computer work, and it was a very depressing year and a half of my life. If you had a plexi and a twin, both around 100 watts and equally loud, but how can the Marshall be equally as loud in SPL if it's designed to hit its ceiling earlier? That's a complicated question. First of all, they're not rated the same. Twin reverb is rated at 85 watts clean. Marshall is rated at 100 watts clean. But it's not like the amps get to that 100 watts or that 85 watts and stop. That's just where they measure clean. The twin will go, so let's say 20 watts above that. When you really push it, you may be like 100 watts. But that's dirty. Whereas the Marshall may be 120, 130 watts when dirty. So there's more power being sent out. And here's the crucial thing. Most 100-watt Marshalls are played into a 4x12 cab. Most twins are played into a 2x12, which is, the combo. So you have two 12-inch speakers, which have this amount of air pushing at you, versus four 12-inch speakers, which have this amount of air pushing at you. So it's a lot more air being moved at higher wattage. And you have to remember that clean Marshall that you're measuring, that's with the amp on like 3. And if you play that amp on 7 or 8, it's a lot louder than that. Due to the nature of the frequencies that we hear when we play a cranked Marshall versus a cranked twin, which frequencies get accentuated, which ones get attenuated, there's stuff that sounds louder and more exciting to our ears. But beyond, the reality is, while they're different for each, the Marshall's louder to a dB meter. To our ears, both of our ears start to compress all to hell at 100 to 110 dB. So we're not really hearing either amp as it really is at that point. We're just, well, that's really loud and really exciting, and the Marshall is even more exciting. But it is a Marshall into a 4x12 cab is louder due to the nature of the speakers and the wattage of the amp than a twin. Twin is freaking loud, though. And also, there was an era where people would play the 100-watt Marshall into two 4x12s, a full stack, which is just ungodly loud. Most people today just have not experienced that, and they cannot imagine the physical impact of those sound waves hitting you. I've done it, and it's amazing that I still have my hearing. Mark, I'm sorry to hear that. Have you tried piano? I'm not being facetious. Just something that'll let you exercise that part of your brain or your soul, however you want to look at your creative outlets. You know, there are a lot of inexpensive keyboards these days, and our computers these days can make great sounds. Find something to keep yourself being creative. It could be watercolors, you know, whatever creativity works for you. Can I use bus wire for jumpering, or is that bad practice? You mean inside an amp tour? Well, you usually don't want to use bus wire for that because it's not insulated, and when you don't have insulated wire, things can short out. It's not a matter of things, you know, being live. You're usually jumpering AC, but typically you want to use stranded insulated wire so that it doesn't have accidental shorts. You technically could use bus wire. Hey, Stepper, no, it's not the dirigible hangar in Lakehurst. Yeah, no. We've never had any Hindenburgs here. That's the old Mid-South Coliseum, an old concert arena here that was built in the very early 60s. And it looks like a UFO has just landed in the middle of our old fairgrounds. Let's see. Do I have a video and other resource on parts needed to set up a decent bench repair shop? Resistors, caps, pots. Oh my God. That would take me too long to make that video, and I would forget things and have to make a second part and say, hey, I forgot this. I don't know. Watch a bunch of my videos, watch a bunch of Brad's videos, watch a bunch of Frank over at Forgotten Gear Restorations videos, and figure out what you see. I mean, you see that thing over my left shoulder back there? Those two bent sets of drawers on the wall. Those are for most commonly used resistors and most commonly used capacitors. What you don't see are all the little containers like this I have, just of stuff. This one's a random bunch of stuff that was on my desk at once, and I needed to get it off my desk at once, you know. And I've got some of these that are very well sorted. I've got like electrolytic capacitors in one. I've got film caps in another one. I've got one with resistors that I don't use every day, but I need to have. I've got some with adhesives, so Velcro and 3M adhesives and stuff. And I've got all kinds of stuff. This one is just stuff that was on my bench one day. So this has got some little double switches. That's got a handle for like a Mesa style, Ampeg style. Some other little switches. Some resistors and values I need to sort out somewhere else. A pot I need to put in one of these that keeps the pot. Some of these little boards I use for recapping Princetons, so I need to put that in a place, and I've got this little terminal strip that goes with it. That goes. So this box is a box of stuff that I need to put and sort into the other boxes, but I've not made the time for it yet. But they're sterilite and I can see them. I don't know that I'm the person to emulate because I'm kind of the mad scientist. Where was that thing that I just had? And certainly Frank uses more electrical gizmos than I do. I use what I find handy all the time because I have a small bench, and I like having a small bench. So I don't have 18 things. I've got 3 little meters and the scope, and I've got a soldering iron, and then anything else, and I've got a little bulb for a light bulb limiter. That does 99% of what I need to do, and everything else I have, like I've got this deluxe reverb going into Variac. It's over there because I'm using it over there. Usually it's underneath the bench. And if I really needed more things, I'd buy more things. But I've got so much stock here at all times, but I couldn't tell you a list of what you need to do first or get first. Hey, Matt, what are my meal plans for tonight? He's grilling steaks with baked potatoes, green beans, and sweet yellow corn. Sounds good. Well, we are going to the theater tonight, though Nikki doesn't know that. And the doors open at 8, and I've got a 6:30 reservations for a really nice Indian restaurant about 3 blocks from the theater. So I'm taking her to an early dinner as far as she knows. She doesn't know any of this. She knows that we're doing something. It's all surprise. So it gives us time to Have a nice Indian meal. Then there's a place that sells ice cream about a half block from there. We'll walk down, maybe split an ice cream cone. After spicy Indian food, a little bit of ice cream would be nice. And then, oh, looky here. I just happen to have tickets. Let's go watch this show. I think I got this covered. And then at intermission, we'll have a glass of wine and sit up on the roof at night. It'd be nice. But normally I would cook for her. Oh, the Vrelin octal thing. Yeah, I saw Brad's reply on that. And yeah, I think Brad's going to speak for both of us on that Vrelin thing. Indonesia, to coffee, do I make a fresh pot every few hours or just pour from the morning pot? Well, once the morning pot is finished, I do then make a fresh pot. But I don't say, oh, this is 2 hours old and throw it out and then make a fresh pot. I like fresh coffee, but I'm not above microwaving coffee that's already brewed. I have a Hazelwood 35-watt boutique amp with all mercury iron. Shall I look at a variable voltage unit, even in a modern amp? Well, one part of that answer is mercury designs for modern wall voltages, so I would think not. The other one is, why don't you ask Hazelwood? Because I don't know what Hazelwood did in their amp. Maybe they did design it to be run at 114 for some reason. As far as the transformers go, no. But as far as the transformers were implemented, you'd have to ask Hazelwood. Sorry. Oh, I started to watch Fringe when it came out, and then they kept introducing all these sharks and then jumping them. I thought the series lost its way pretty quickly, which is a shame. I was initially invested. What's the ideal pot, value, and taper for a simple crossline master volume? 1 meg audio, but crosslines suck. But if you must do a crossline, 1 meg audio. Another thumbs up for Brad's Guitar Garage and 5-Watt World. Both are great in their own way. They are very, very different ways. If Keith is, and he knows I would say this, if Keith is like the Mr. Rogers of our guitar community, Brad ain't that. Both good guys, both very good guys. Hey Tebow, send me an email and I'll look for it. I get so many emails, both legit and junk, and it's hard for me to keep track. I get so much junk emails, and then I get people asking me if I want to work on this amp that's worth $200 and blah blah blah. And no, I'd be glad to work on a 60s Fender Chap. It's just a matter of how many amps I already have, how many amps I'm already committed to taking in. So send me an email with your phone number in it, and we'll talk. Turnaround time depends on what the app needs. Typically 2 to 3 weeks. So. Wish I could afford a Reach You Bluesbreaker. I'm sure they must sound amazing. Well, no, they don't. Not as they come from Marshall. See, I've got like 6 or more videos on the Reach You amps Marshall's made over the years, and they're usually have just horribly stupid, crippling goofs. There's no reason they couldn't have sounded amazing, but they're bound and determined to F it up. But a fully functional one does sound amazing. I fixed them all, and then the fixed version does sound amazing, but they could have sounded like that from the factory if someone at the factory had A, cared, B, known what a Marshall should sound like. You don't have to use flameproof. It's nice to use flameproof. Flameproof resistors are more expensive, but if you just have regular metal films, regular carbon films, you can use them. But here's my recommendation. As much as will physically fit, given the space, leave the leads a little bit longer. So if they do char, if they do burn, they're not going to burn things that are adjacent to them. So get them up in the air, away from each other, away from other things, away from like heater wiring. That's the main advantage of a flame proof. If you have a little carbon film or metal film resistor that does go poof with a little smoke, and it's not touching anything else, it's not too close to anything else, it's fine. There's going to be a little smoke in the air. If it's physically touching your heater wire and it does that, then you can have fire. So Brad and I use the flame proof because, well, yeah, it costs more to order flame proof, but we'll order 200-300 at a time and not think about it for several years, and it pays for itself. If you're doing it yourself and you already have some half-watt metal film or carbon film, 100 ohms, just use them. But just make sure that, plan on what would happen if this were to get so hot that it caught on fire. Make sure it's not going to take anything else out with it. And this thing keeps going up high. You guys were here, right? You saw at the beginning of this, it was not up here. It was here. I keep doing this, and it keeps creeping up, and I'm not hitting any button that would make it do that. So I don't know what the deal is. It did that last 2 streams. It's driving me nuts. Erisco, Eric Oscar Guitar. Sorry, I was trying to make that more complicated. Your English is much better than my Finnish, so I'm delighted you're here, and absolutely, anyone is welcome here. If your English is not your first language, I'm even more amazed that you're paying attention to us, and I will always make allowances for little grammar oddities. You know, I am not one of those ugly Americans who expects the entire world to be American or the entire world to speak English. But having traveled, and I've not been to Finland, but having been to Austria, most Austrians I've interacted with have better English than most Americans I interact with. So, you know, please don't feel any need to apologize for your English. I could not even say I'm sorry in Finnish. A few other languages, but not Finnish. What do I think about removing the standby on a cathode-biased EL84 amp? I don't think about it. Most cathode-biased EL84 amps, that is not anything to do with standby. Standby has to do with whether something is I got a cathode follower, or what the filter caps are rated for when the power tubes aren't drawing any current, or if it has a rectifier tube. So I don't, cathode bias EL84 has nothing to do with whether an amp has standby or not. Sorry, I don't mean to sound dismissive, but is a Seriatone 2204 a good Marshall clone, or should I save up for a proper Marshall reissue? Well, Marshall's not done a proper reissue in a really long time. I wouldn't waste too much time and effort looking for a proper Marshall reissue. Maybe find a used Marshall reissue that's in good shape. That'd be a better use to your money. Marshall has not been doing well by their transformers as far as their customers go. Seriatone's weird. There's a video I have where someone bought a brand new 2204 or 2203, I think 2204 Seriatone, had it, bought it brand new, brought it to me the day it arrived, and I had to go through it and then fix major ground issues because they use a goddamn oversized ground bus, and the damn wire was too thick. The solder wouldn't stick to it. They never got a good solder joint to their ground bus. And I show that in the video, and I show fixing it. But a Marshall should never have a ground bus wire. It's so frustrating. And things in Seritones can be fantastic. The lead dress, many of the components are great. And then they'll have very generic, very cheap stamped metal looking transformers where it just screams poor quality. And I've heard from other techs that they do have a short lifespan, but I don't have any direct knowledge of that myself. Really amazingly cheap IEC connectors, really amazingly cheap fuse holders that aren't always tight. Generic electrolytics that are covered in orange plastic that says stereotone. And yet other things are done at a remarkably high level with the way the wiring's done. So I'm not a big fan of stereotone. I want to be. I'd love to recommend them, but they have gotten enough things wrong consistently that I'm like, really? And the guy has already, the guy who does it does not like me because I've been honest about my findings. Other people love Nick. Other people love the guy entirely. And so maybe I've just had the only 12 or more bad ones ever made have all miraculously come to my bench, including the one that was brand new. But I can't say great things about the Marshall reissues either. If you get a used one, sure. For the same price or less, get a used or new Germino if you want more of a 60s kind of thing. If you want a higher gain amp, Friedman and Sur and Metro, these are much better amps built by people who actually care about whether it lasts and whether it sounds good, and because the name on it is actually theirs. Jim Marshall's gone. Rest in peace, Jim Marshall. No one with the name Marshall, unless they're an accountant or a secretary somewhere, is working at that company. No one at the company Marshall is the CEO. It's not their name. It's not their reputation on the line. They're a big company, and they're going to look into whether they can market Bluetooth headphones to you and refrigerators and whatever. But guitar amps are kind of an afterthought, as far as I can tell, because they know they're going to sell the guitar amps because it has the logo. Uh, 6BQ5 is a different name for EL84. Yeah, they're absolutely fine. With all the Marshall reissues, 2203, 2204, 87, and 59s, and the J1045 and Bluesbreaker reissues, the main fault with those amps, besides the fact that the transformers tend to fail, the transformers can, especially on the 90s and early 2000s, can become very noisy. And on some of the Bluesbreaker reissues, the transformer orientation was wrong from the factory. But beyond that, the consistent fault is they have a heater balance circuit which uses two resistors mounted on a quad of turrets, which then go to a little blue trim pot to balance the heater supply, which then goes to ground. And they burn, and because that pot cannot handle the current. So the fix for that is to take out that pot, replace the 200 ohm resistors with a new pair of resistors and bring them directly to the ground, bypassing the pot. And then you just have a standard non-adjustable heater balance that works and will be less likely to emulate the entire amp. And Brad's seen it, I've seen it, a bunch of techs have seen it, where that little blue trim pot, not rated for the current present in the heater supply, damages a lot of things in that amp because you get a nasty kind of short condition, and the cathode follower stage often burns other things. It's just not pleasant. $58.79. Thank you, Gooden. Yeah, that's the pentode that can be a good EF86 replacement with a few wires being moved. I can never remember numbers. What new amps have come out recently that I'm interested in checking out? Well, I still would like to check out a Rev amp because I hear a lot of good things about them, but I have no experience with them. But no models have come out that interest me. I don't pay attention to the damn news. I don't care about the guitar industry. I don't care about this or that, or rumors or any of the dramas. I've not seen any new variations on amplifier design in a long time that really did anything unusual or that interesting to me. I thought that the amps that, what was the brand? They were really good, and then they disappeared. Dan Buell's company, 65 amps. They were doing something called the Producer, where they had some low voltage, high current transformers made for them to get really good sounds out of a very low wattage amp. I never got a chance. I've not had a chance to try one. That seemed like a useful innovation to treat the amplifier as a tone generator rather than just an amplifier to make things loud. But the company didn't make it for whatever reason. Before that, the last really innovative guitar amp in terms of tubes would be like the SLO. The Soldano SLO was the last new kid on the block that really meant anything. I'm aware of all the modeling technology because the modeling stuff is getting better all the time. And every year it gets closer to putting guys like me a little bit more out of business, but it's not there yet. And even when the modeling gets there, to hear it on stage, for those of us who aren't wanting or can't afford to have really good inner ear monitors and a sound guy who goes with us and does our monitor mix live in real time, so we still need some way to hear ourselves on stage. And so that's going to involve some kind of amplifier to get that digital modeling up to a level where I can hear it with a monitor. And, what are you going to do? You're going to use something made by Bose, because that stuff is made like shit and fails all the time. We're still going to have reliability issues. A well-maintained deluxe reverb is going to be more reliable than a digital modeling pedal run into a Bose system or some other powered monitors out there. Like some of the JBLs have some serious construction problems. It gets tricky. If Dustin's still here, he may have some thoughts on that, because he's dealing with that at a high level, much higher level than most of us are playing at. Having weird bias issues on a 7400 watt Marshall. All voltages look good, including pin 5, but I can only get 8 milliamps of bias current. Have not had this issue before and confirmed it's not the tubes. Stumped. Hey, Brock, what is the voltage at pin 5? What is your voltage from the raw bias, and what is your voltage at pin 5? Hopefully you're still here, and you can put it in the live part of the chat. I'll see that down there. Because if your voltage range is not going close enough to zero, say for whatever reason yours is between 50 and 70, negative 50 and negative 70, you may not have enough range on your bias adjustment to get the tubes hot. You could also have a faulty, if someone installed them, you could have a faulty resistor from cathode to ground, in which case there's not going to be a path. If you have a faulty resistor there, you're just not going to have any ability for that tube to operate. So those are the things I would want to know. I want to know, in a 7400 watt Marshall, I would expect the bias range to between like negative 35 and negative 50 volts, roughly. I would probably expect it to be somewhere around 37 to 42, negative 37, negative 42 in actual operation. And if it's just not getting if you're stuck in the negative 60 range, you're not going to have that happen. So I need the information. Hey, Seppo Marks. For AC30 Custom Series amps, where do you get those wizard sleeve bits that hold the valve retainers in place on the tube tips? Those are sections of shrink wrap. They put the shrink wrap, a little section that fits over the tube tip and that little bit of the spring, and they snip off with like an 1/8 inch left, and then they hit it with a you can use a hair dryer, but I use a heat gun, and it just shrinks it on there. And then when it gets lost, you just do it again. But yeah, you can go to the hardware store and buy some 1/4 inch or 1/8 or somewhere in between shrink wrap, and one package will do 10 years worth of tube changes if you need to. That's all it is. It's not that necessary, but that's all it is. Do I know VHT Special 6 amp? Well, VHT, I don't get many in. There are two eras of VHT. The previous era, when it was owned by Steve Fryette, and everything was done with his name, and it was very high end. And the current stuff, which is kind of generic garbage. And the amps of the current VHTs I've had in have been just hot garbage. I almost said hot shit, but that'd be a compliment. It just so I don't know which era the VHT Special 6 falls into. Sorry. Schwarzenegger's German language dubs were done by voice actor because producers thought his Austrian accent made him sound like a farmer. Wow, that's harsh. I'd hate to be the person who had to tell him that. Brad can attack my tone if he wants. Only Brad, though. Only Brad. I mean, he'd be wrong, but he's allowed to. Except for that video 2 streams ago when I was trying to do the stream with the lav mic. Man, the guitar sounds like shit through that lav mic. It sounded so good in the room. I listened to that back. I'm like, I wish I hadn't done any guitar at all. It was that bad. I don't know what hey, thanks, Maz, Greg. I have no idea what the Ruby mod is. What the hell's the Ruby mod? I don't. People are like, hey, can you do the Master Volume 4 or the Master Volume 17 or the Ruby? I don't know what any of that stuff is. I know what the circuits are. Have I ever implemented the Ruby mod to tame the dizziness? There's a lot of ways that tame fizziness, you mean? I've never had an amp experience dizziness. Maybe a magnetone thing. Oh, there it is, fizziness, yeah. There are a lot of ways to tame fizz, but I've never had to look up someone else's mods to do that. Brock says, negative 30 volts confirmed range is good. Well, negative 30 is really low. I would set that to like negative 40, negative 45 first, so you know you're in a safe range. Does Brock Music, does your amp have resistors between the cathode, pins 1 and 8 if you got 34s, and the chassis? If so, make sure that those are measuring 1 ohms or at least the same per and nothing over like 10 ohms. But I hate those things. It's just a needless point of failure. Oh, the Zener diodes between the phase inverter and the power tubes. Oh, I don't think that's the way to do it, Maz Greg. I've not played around with it though. I'm trying to think. On an 18-watt clone, I just can't see Zeners between the phase inverter and power tubes being a good idea. There's a cap across the phase inverter sides to be a good idea. Allegedly stops crossover distortion. That sounds like introducing a big point of failure as a band-aid for an existing problem. 18-watt Marshalls are using EL84s, and so you can have the same issue there that you have with an AC15. I would say either just do what Vox did and do a cap in series with the resistance to dial in the amount of high end rolled off or fizz, or you can, I don't care for it, but you look at what they did in like the Dr. Z Maz thing, not Maz thing, but the Carmen Gia, which is called a Zobel network, and that's doing it across the actual secondary as opposed or across the primary, across the primary of the output transformer as opposed to doing it across the grids. But again, when you do a Zobel network, you're dealing with high voltage, more likelihood of something to fail, whereas if you do it on the grids going to the output tubes, any change you make to the amp, all right, here's what I'm trying to achieve, but am I changing the risk of failure? If I'm dramatically increasing the risk of failure to solve a minor problem, So no, I don't keep up with all those things. And I always find the best solution is the simplest solution. And if the simpler solution doesn't do the trick, there's some other problem. Can I explain the tonal differences or similarities between the 59 basement reissue versus a 57 custom twin? Which one would I go with? I'm not sure in terms of the custom versus the reissue, because I don't know I've not had the 57 custom twin in. As far as an actual 57, 58 basement or 57 twin, high power twin, they're the same amp with different speakers and different output transformers. In which case, which cab do I like the sound of? Do I like the sound of the 2x12 version, or do I like the sound of the 4x10 version? But when you're talking about the reissue version of them, I don't know, because I've not had the 57 custom twin in from Fender. And the Bassman's a pretty good amp with some stupid things in it, stupid mistakes that are relatively easy to fix, but they need to be fixed. So, Desoldering is a hot rod Lincoln tone. Oh yeah, man, that sounds to me like Telecaster cranked Fender Deluxe Reverb or Vibrolux Reverb. You can also get there with the Vox. It's a short stop from Hot Rod Lincoln to Brad Paisley, and you get a slap back and go to town. Hey, nothing wrong with being a boomer. I'm just not one. My mom's a boomer. My dad's a boomer. I'm not. I went gray when I was 30. So I've been prematurely distinguished for way too long now. Was there ever a Jump the Shark guitar purchase that stopped gas for me, or have I long had the instrument you wanted? Well, it's really hard to stop gas. Gear acquisition syndrome, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, not anything to do with our gastronomic tract or anything. Jump the Shark is over the top crazy thing. So, I've pretty much got all the instruments that I want, with two exceptions. I like to have a Rickenbacker at some point. Maybe a 12, maybe just a 360, just because I've always wanted one. But I don't have a pressing need for one. I can get almost all those sounds with a Telecaster, and I want a really nice. Acoustically, I should probably retry the classical guitar, but I've never been able to find a classical guitar that feels right, because it always feels like the fretboard's concave to me. It's a different instrument, but they sound so nice and they look so pretty. I also always wanted an OM18, though I don't need an OM18. I would like to get a 12-string acoustic at some point, but I don't need any of those. I arguably don't need all the ones I have. I've got, from one perspective, way too many guitars. But I enjoy playing each one, and for the channel, it's nice to have the variety. But I don't I don't watch YouTube, hey, this new guitar is out videos very often. I'll see them if everyone in the world is doing the same guitar that just came out on the same day, I'll especially not watch those. But if someone whose videos I like says, hey, I've been trying out this new guitar and I really do like it, or like I think I'm not a fan of the PRS headstock, and I'm not every one of those people who looks at it like a PRS wood library guitar and drools. I do know that if I were traveling and had to get a guitar, or whatever, I don't have any of my guitars, and I need to have one guitar, and I could only spend X amount, the PRS DGT SE would be a really good choice. I know that's a really good guitar. But I would rather have that than a 10 top $5,000 PRS. Let's see. So now we're talking about 2x12 versus 4x12. When I see the comments, I'm like, okay, that's where I was. Now I know where I'm at in relation to that. So we're doing well on time. I have no idea what a GSK electrolytic cap is, Alfred. Sorry. I've been debating wiring the unused triode in my Mojotone Custom 50 amp and use it as a cascaded gain stage. Is a high watt circuit in need of more crunch? I don't think you'd want that in a high watt. The high watt's got a lot of low end in the output section and a very specific presence circuit. I think that would be very painful with more gain. You can try it, but I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think you get that much more out of it than if you were to get just an overdrive pedal. Where you add the gain matters an awful lot. And in a high watt circuit, I'd want to add the gain at the input. And you might as well just get a really good overdrive pedal and save yourself a bunch of work, because you're going to end up in this very similar place. I'm not sure what you're replying to there, but all of a sudden I want to go listen to TLC. But you missed sexy. You got crazy and you got cool. Any thoughts on the early 90s version of the PV Classic 50? I had one. It's a good amp. Thought it, at the time, I thought it was a fantastic amp. Now I still think it's a pretty good amp. The issue with the Classic 50 at this point is that the electrolytics need to be changed. And there's an awful lot of glue on that board that makes that difficult. If one of the pots needs to be changed, it's hard to get the pots, or at the tail end of availability for the specialized pots that they used. And in a Classic 50, there are two little 1/8 watt resistors in between the big electrolytics in that amp. And for whatever reason, those resistors go up in smoke. I have no idea why they use tiny little resistors. Oh, it's the Paul Ruby mod. Okay, that's kind of like doing a diode clipper like the Jose mod. I'm not a fan of that kind of approach. There are ways to defizz things that don't involve radically changing the behavior. And, try it if you like it. That's fine to me. You're going to get some weird compression artifacts. And again, if something goes wrong, that's a lot of voltage present. And, you're increasing the risk of failure compared to a fairly simple passive roll-off, low-pass filter like you get in the Vox cut circuit, which is very easy to implement in a Marshall 18 watt. I've also played a lot of Marshall 18 watts in stock form that sounded great, and if they were fizzy when you pushed them, roll your tone back, go to the neck pickup, use a thicker pick, use a different overdrive pedal. It is what it is, and it's not going to sound like, it's not supposed to sound like every possible thing in the world. It's supposed to be like, hey, this is this character. Thoughts on adding Mojotone effects loop in a Mojotone blackface Princeton reverb, delete trim and reverb, and use the extra tubes for additional gain stages. Reverb and trim will be on pedals and the loop. Yeah, my thoughts on that are don't buy a Mojotone blackface Princeton reverb and then decide to turn it into something else. Buy something else that already has all the gain that you want, that already has an effects loop. And I think Mojotone makes some other amps that fit that criteria, as a lot of companies do. I think the point of a Princeton reverb is that you don't need anything else. And if you want to make it into something else, I think it's a mistake. And I'm not saying that you're wrong or that what a stupid thing to think. A lot of people understand go down this road until you've done it a few times. You're like, oh, when you say it's not apples to apples and apples and oranges, don't turn an apple into an orange. If you want an orange, get the orange. And if you want a tangerine, it's the tangerine. If you want a grapefruit, well, let's go with the analogy. Those are all that side of things. But Yellow Delicious ain't gonna give you a glass of OJ. What a stupid thing to say. You see my point. I was trying to make a point while I've got to pee. And so my brain is just kind of sloshing around in here along with other things. Anyway, my point was valid, even if it got a little stupid in how I phrased it. Don't buy an amp that does this and then expect to make a bunch of changes to make it do that. Buy the amp that already does that. I'll see you guys back in another 7 minutes. Maybe my post-piss brain will be a little more functional. All right, coming back a little bit early from that break because I want to get to everyone's questions. Let's see here. Where were we? What black probe tool do I use and where do I source them? That is a tool that came with some really cheap soldering irons they used to sell at Radio Shack. And before I bit the bullet and bought a Weller, I would buy soldering irons from Radio Shack. And every 6 months they would die and I have to buy another one. All those crappy soldering irons are long gone. But they came with that little black tool. It's a spudger at one end that'll hold resistor leads, and the other end is just pointy. Great little plastic tool. I've got 3 of them, but I would never use those Radio Shack irons again, even if Radio Shack were still in business. But you can just go get a wooden chopstick. You can take a chopstick and put it in a pencil sharpener if you want to have a pointy end. Yeah, that's all it is. How do I get rid of a dank, dark smell from an amp cab and the fabric covers? Oh, you want to get it dry. Probably take the chassis out of it so the cabinet gets more air, and leave it outdoors if you can, or at least in a space with a lot of ventilation and fresh air for a few days. You might want to try some Febreze or something. If I can't stand the way that stuff smells. If you're really serious about it, maybe some on the inside where it's not visible, just in case it makes a mess, maybe some baking soda just to soak stuff up. I'm not sure. It's not just about wattage. It's fenders were designed to stay clean, not as fanatically clean as High Watt was chasing. Whereas Marshalls are all variations on the previous fenders, which weren't especially clean, the 58 Baseman. And Marshall kept chasing the way it breaks up. And so the circuits changed. And the real answer is 45 minutes long. But it's not just about wattage, because you can have a 50-watt Marshall and a 50-watt Fender, and they have very radically different sounds. But, it's about which frequencies are pushed, which frequencies are attenuated, how the stages interact. It's really complicated and beautiful. And that's part of the joy of all this. Greg says he was recording a concert that Paul Rogers was on the bill. Both guitar players had 3 full stacks each side. That was oppressive. They felt like they were all on. Oh my God, that'd be loud. Stevie Ray was that loud. I saw Stevie Ray, and his wall of amps were louder than the PA. I don't know if there's any guitar coming through the PA. And the vocals and the drums and the organ and the bass were all through the PA and barely keeping up with that wall of, oh my God, it was like sitting 30 feet in front of a jet engine. Really toneful, amazing sounding, amazing playing jet engine, but still, it was more than oppressive. Hopefully my analogies will improve as the rest of the stream goes on. What's my experience with transistor amps? I've got a lot of transistor experience, but they all vary. It's not like, hey, transistors are all this way and tubes are all this way. Lots of crappy tube amps out there, lots of great transistor amps out there. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. B.A. Lint or a Ballin T. I'm not sure how you approach that username, but if you're 05 Supreme XL, I'm not familiar with that, but if that's working for you, especially for $130, hey, that's great. Anything that, at the end of the day, anything that lets you express yourself creatively, that does what you need it to do, is a great thing. My problem historically on the channel is when something is sold to you as, this is going to be great, especially when it costs a lot of money, and it's not, or even if it sounds good, it's going to catch on fire. I want people to know what they're getting, and there's an entire industry. This is not hyperbole. I'm not bullshitting you. There's an entire industry devoted to obfuscating crap, to lie to you, to tell you that this thing is fantastic and you should go out and buy it. when it's objectively, demonstrably, predictably terrible. But they'd rather spend the money convincing us all that bad things are good things than to spend the money to make good things. That bothers me. It's not just guitar amps and guitar pedals and stuff. It's all aspects of society. That's a larger conversation these days. But can I shed light on the West Coast jump blues tone? Almost sounds like a very small speaker kind of tone. How would I achieve that? Is it the amp or the speaker? Ooh, I'm not sure what the West Coast jump blues tone is, but I imagine probably a combination of the amp and the speaker. Most things are. Tell you what, there's a video I have up of Joe Restivo. Balint, or I'm not sure how you do the A in Hungarian. Sorry, Balint. I thought that was like a combination of first and last name. Sorry about that. But there's a video of him playing a 39 Charlie Christian amp, the EH 150, with an ES 150 guitar, or 125 guitar, I think, for the guitar. It's basically the Charlie Christian rig. And he played, Joe plays that style. He plays Grant Green perfectly. And that gives a good example of what I think you're talking about. It was a very bouncy, percussive, but warm, no crisp attack kind of sound. That might be what you're describing. There's another video with Joe, not as good audio because I did it back when I was doing everything on the phone, of him playing a 46 or 48 Gibson amp, again with his big Epiphone Zephyr and then one of my tellies in the other room. But in both those cases, flat wounds, hard pick, great player, small amp, character speaker, small speaker. And it just has this kind of percussive thing that just jumps out kind of like a tenor saxophone. But I don't know specifically West Coast jump blues. All right, well, Joe, you've never seen 5 Watt World? Yeah, check out all his videos. It's fantastic. Keith is great. As are his videos. What's my suggestion for a 47 nanofarad cap or 0.047 microfarad cap for a Strat? Thanks, man. I appreciate that. The one that you have, pretty much. There's not going to be any difference in sound between this 47 nanofarad or this 47 nanofarad when it comes to capacitor for guitar. You can use an orange drop. You can use a Mallory. You can use a little Wema. You can use a little Panasonic. You can use a great big old expensive Jupiter if you want. As long as they're all 47 nanofarad. You won't hear any difference because of the material. Don't pay for paper and oil. Remember the old Strats, first of all, they had 100, not 47. But the old Strats just used little ceramic caps, little cheap ceramic disc caps. Not particularly good ones, because all it is a passive roll-off. So if you have a 47 nanofarad cap, which is 0.047 microfarad, there you go. I tend to use ones rated for 400 volts or higher because the lead is stronger, and I know that if the pot gets a little bit loose, it's not going to break, or it's not going to vibrate from having a cap body suspended on tiny leads on like a 50-volt cap. But that's just a matter of the mechanical properties of the part. That has nothing to do with electronics. Brad is an excellent tech who pretends that he's not, and that is a hilarious game to me because I see him do brilliant things. And Brad, if you're still watching this, your video earlier in the week with that little cheap PV Windsor, where you found that the through-hole plating wasn't through-hole plating on the tube socket parts on the PCB, that was a really good find. You did a great job by that customer. You did a great fix on that, and that is the kind of diagnostic skill that most people do not exhibit, to say, hey, this should do X, but it's not. It can only be one of these two things. Okay, this is what it is, as opposed to, looks like it ought to work. Let's just gut it and rebuild it from scratch, There's a lot of that out there. Any thoughts on pre-phase inverter master volumes? Do I think they sound clearer at low volumes? Well, no. A pre-phase inverter master volume, depending on the amp circuit, can be fine, or it can be anemic. Like if you have a AC30 or a 1959 super lead, and you put a pre-phase inverter master volume in, well, then you're losing a huge part of the amp. You're losing an entire gain stage of the amp because you're not going to be hitting the phase inverter hard. So as you turn the master volume down, the amp cleans up. So you cannot get an overdriven sound at a low volume. The Marshall Origin 20 makes this mistake. Post-phase inverter master volume, you still have the phase inverter working as a gain stage. So you still have an overdrive sound as you turn the master volume down. The negative of a post-phase inverter is that as you turn the master volume down past a certain point, the negative feedback circuit begins to collapse and the presence doesn't do anything. That's usually a worthwhile trade-off for low volume use, but there's a sweet spot, a wide sweet spot where you are attenuating the output, but your presence still works. Jeff Mackerlane, I'm glad I'm not holding the guitar at this moment. The important stuff, what's my coffee brewing method? Well, I have an OXO coffee maker, and I take out the basket, and I dump the grounds and the old filter, and I put a new filter in the basket, and I put 1.5 scoops of the coffee du jour in there. Right now, I believe it's Dunkin' Donuts medium blend, and I put it in there, and I fill the tap water up to 8 on the back, and I tell it to brew a pot. And the important thing about that OXO is that it does not heat the water up to boiling. It's like 190, 195 degrees, which works really well for coffee, apparently. And it tastes good because I'm not doing espresso, I'm doing a cup of joe. And Jeff says he's sorry to hear this. Well, I'll tell you what, if I make it to New York and we go for a cup of coffee, you can show me a place that does a really good latte. But I don't want to spend the money on a cappuccino espresso machine for home. I like a good cup of joe. I think they're almost separate things. It's like, you can relate to this. It's like, I like playing electric guitar. I like playing acoustic guitar. In theory, I like playing a nylon string guitar. They're all guitars, but they're all different things. And so to me, real good macchiato standing at the counter in Florence is different than a good mug of coffee on my front porch in the morning, which is different than maybe a really nice caramel latte at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Does that make sense to you? So, but that's how I do coffee at home, because that's what I can afford to do. It's what I have time to do and patience to do. Hey, anything more complicated than the coffee maker is I would not be able to make it in the morning, because I would not be able to make a cup of espresso before I've had coffee. I could not possibly operate an espresso machine before I've had coffee. So, but I'm not saying that any other approach to coffee is bad, but I'm telling you what I honestly do. And you know, the OXO makes a really good cup of coffee. It doesn't overheat the water. It's not doing anything crazy. It's just simple, and it works every time. And it works a lot better than the Braun that I used to have. And it doesn't give you that burnt coffee thing that you would get with Mr. Coffees and all that awful stuff. And I've messed around with French presses and all that. It's really hard to get French presses to not just leave you with silt in your mouth. Yeah. Can I help you understand how jumpering 2 channels on Silverface Fender amp? Well, there's no second part to that. I don't know if I can help you to understand. Well, if you jumper 2 channels on a Silverface Fender amp, same with the, if it's an amp that has reverb, they're out of phase with each other, so you won't get additive gain. You may get a nasty sound, you may get a great sound. If you have If you have a non-reverb amp, then it's going to behave more like a Marshall. You get additive gain. You get more gain as you do that. Jeff, I am, what's the right term for it? I'm a realistic coffee snob. Like, I can't drink Folgers. I can't drink standard Maxwell House, but I think the French roast is pretty good. If I go, I don't drink Starbucks. All their stuff tastes burnt. I don't like stuff that's aggressively sour. I don't like the acidic stuff. I don't like the stuff that tastes like it's been charred. I can tell when an espresso or a drip coffee is really good, but I don't need to be. I don't need to spend the equivalent of $4 or $5 a cup at home, especially since I drink like 6 cups a day. So here's the thing. I love to cook. I will make a very fancy French dinner. I'll make a French dinner that takes 3 days to prepare. I will make it a stir fry, but everything is just so. And I also like a cheeseburger at a dive bar, you know. And so at home, I go to the dive bar cheeseburger form of coffee. But I'm particular about it. It has to be a good one. So. Hey, Joe. Yeah, I had one of those come in. Brand new, bad power transformer. Brand new, very expensive, bad power transformer. Not a fan. Pardon me. Hey, General Ethos. Is it okay to use 20 microfarad 500 volt MOD and 40 microfarad 500 volt electrolytic caps instead of the stock values of 16, 16, 16, 32 in my deluxe reverb build? I'm also using 100 microfarad 100 volt caps in the bias port. Yeah, it's fine. You aren't going to hear a difference between 16 and 20. I often use the 20s in deluxe reverbs because the 20s are rated for 500 volts versus the 475 or 450 rating on most 16s. 40 microfarad is very similar to 32. Yeah, absolutely fine. That's what I do all the time. I'm also using 100 microfarad. I usually use 47 microfarad there instead of 100, but 100 microfarad is absolutely fine for the bias as well. Let's see. It's all right. So it's an orange 30 with a warm-up switch, not standby. Okay, 40 volt. I'm not sure what you're saying there, XL. I'd have to have your amp. I can't. When I don't know that circuit, what they're doing. I can't extrapolate or guess. If something's blowing, there's a reason for it. And if I had it in front of me, I could find the reason. But without seeing it or being able to measure it, I can't tell you. Let's see. Yeah, General Ethos. Yeah, always good to plan for the worst case scenario when it comes to the voltages and caps and stuff. You're absolutely correct. Okay. Now here's the full question. If you wanted to play around with it, just plug into the high gain input of one channel and run a cable from the low gain input of that same channel to the high input gain of the other channel, and then turn the volume knobs up and see what it does. It doesn't make any substantial difference which channel you go into. You possibly will get a ground loop doing this though. Not that often, but sometimes you will. In theory, it's best to use that with an ABY box that has a ground lift on the B output, but it's not usually necessary for just the one amp. What is the rule of thumb criteria for when you should have a standby switch in a push-pull amp? 6V6 versus EL34. The tube type has nothing to do with it. Whether it's cathode bias or fixed bias has nothing to do with it. Doesn't even matter if it's push-pull or single-ended. What matters is whether or not you have a rectifier tube or solid-state rectification, whether you have a cathode follower stage, because you don't want to have full B plus present before that tube is drawing current. You don't want to have unloaded B plus, which exceeds the rating of the filter caps. So if your unloaded B plus is 510 volts, which drops to 470 when the power tube's warmed up, and you've only got 500 volt caps, you don't want to bring it out of standby and potentially damage your caps until the tube's drawing current. But say you had, like on this 58 basement here, instead of having parallel caps and then a single cap for the screen node, it now has two series caps for the reservoir and then a series cap for the screen. So it's got 700 volts, and then the other caps in here are 450 or 500 volts. So yeah, if this has a rectifier tube, I don't need to use standby on this at all. But if I were to put in a solid state rectifier instead, you still could use just power it on without standby as far as the filter caps are concerned. Whereas the stock amp, you could not. The voltage would exceed the rating of the filter caps. But you still would not want to do that on this amp if it had a solid state rectifier, because it has a cathode follower, and the cathode follower, V2, could be damaged if you're powering it straight up without standby, unless you have a tube rectifier, in which case you don't need to use standby at all, because there is no B plus in this amp once you turn it on until the rectifier tube warms up. And the rectifier tube takes longer to warm up than the 6L6s, or in your case, 6V6s or 34s take. So by the time the rectifier tube is providing current and providing voltage, not providing current, but providing voltage, the power tubes are already drawing current, which means that the voltage cannot exceed X amount, which means that the same thing for the cathode follower stage. Alfred, I don't know what GSK caps are. They're available to you locally. I don't know where local is. I would use, for a deluxe reverb reissue, I would want to use, of the tubes of the caps that are available pretty much everywhere, I would want to use MOD, TAD, or F&T. Now, I am unfamiliar with GSK, but that does not mean that they're bad caps. I just don't know about them. If anyone here knows about GSK caps and can give Alfred some better information, please feel free to chip in. Jump in, rather, not chip in. Why is the Blackface Fender reverb driver configured with its 2.2K and 25 microfarad caps better than the later 6880 ohm resistor without the cap? And why did Fender start using 2000 picofarad caps across the 220 reverb grid leak? Because Fender was trying to save in one part, on one hand, Fender was trying to save a component, make it cheaper and easier to build the amp by not having a capacitor. And those capacitors were a little bit expensive at the time. And on the other hand, what the designer would tell you is that it's going to be a more linear behavior to the tube if it doesn't have an AC bypass, if it's just a non-bypass cap with just a fixed DC resistor. Sometimes when you have a Fender and you turn the reverb up, you get a little dirt on the reverb itself that's not there when the reverb is at a lower level. They were trying to make everything clean. The trouble is that resistor is going to be drawing a lot more current and generating more heat than the resistor really likes, and those resistors tend to fail. Second of all, it really is a hard bias operating condition for the 12AT7. So 12AT7 lasts longer with the 2.2K and the 25 or 22 microfarad cap across it than it does with a 680 or 470 or 820, which are the three versions that values they usually use. Second of all, there's nothing wrong with the sound of the 60s circuit in terms of that little bit of grit that you can get it when you're pushing it. So I think that it was creating reliability issues to solve a problem that was never really a problem. As far as using the 2000 picofarad caps across the 220K reverb grid leak, it was to prevent oscillation or high frequent. Basically, they started realizing as this 60s ended in the 70s began that their wiring was getting worse and worse, and rather than spend the money to retrain their workers or to accept that they could only make X number of amps a day versus X times 1.5 amps a day, they just put in those snubber caps on the output grids to prevent oscillation. I will often leave the 2000 picofarad cap across the grid leak because it doesn't really make much difference on the reverb. If you feel it's dark, you try lifting it. But I always want to get rid of those grids on the caps on the output of the tube grids. Have I ever built a kit guitar? Any recommendations? Not really. This is a Mojitone neck and body and Callahan pickguard and Fender bridge, but it is a Fender bridge that someone had done the little roundovers on, and I did all the electronics, and it's a Callahan plate. So kind of, but it's not like really a kit guitar. And then I had a friend of mine do the nut and get all the frets leveled and dressed and all that beautiful stuff. Stuff I know how to do, but don't have the room, tools, or desk handling capacity for. Thank you, Maz Greg. Appreciate that. Let's see. All right, here, yeah, Bose can fuck right off. Yeah, Dustin does live sound for a living at a fairly high level, from what I gather, and I think his disdain for Bose is even higher than mine and Brad's, which is saying a lot. Don't buy the Bose stuff. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's JBL stuff that he'd say that's fine, and then other JBL stuff is like, I wouldn't, and other JBL stuff is like, nah, I wouldn't even do it with my enemy's money. What made Soldano SL important was the cascading gain stages. It was more gain than anyone had ever achieved in a stable manner, repeatedly, on a large scale from a guitar amp. Now, there were some train wrecks, I think, that predated it. Train wrecks were made in very limited quantities by one guy, and it's really hard to get a train wreck not to oscillate and become an awful thing. Now, it's a balancing act. Soldano made it so that he could make as many of them as he wanted to. They all do the same thing, and was more gain and more saturation than anyone had ever experienced in a guitar amp before. It was like it's like taking the Mesa's best efforts and saying, "Oh, that's nice, kid. This is what it sounds like if it's not a Bumblebee." Now, that said, I still find the traditional SLO to be a little bit too nasal. It's easily fixed. It's just one cap. Mesa liked it so much that they ripped him off. Dual rectifier. Peavey liked it so much that they ripped him off. 5150. 5150 is a very badly built copy of an SLO. The dual rectifier is a truly shittily built copy of a SLO. I don't know why Mike Soldano didn't just sue the hell out of them. But if you want the good version of that kind of sound, you get the SLO. But yeah, it's the cascading gain stages. It's the 606 output section with a low bias, with a pretty cool bias. There's some other things he did that were very nice, but it doesn't really affect the sound just in terms of reliability. Soldano is not based on the Mark II boogies. The boogies have the gain structure all the way backwards. compared to Soldana. Soldana got it right. You're not posting stupid, but people say a lot of things that have no bearing on reality. And sometimes they do it about guitar amps, but I'm not going to talk about attorney generals. Let's see, attorneys general, sorry. Are there guidelines for filter caps and solid state amps? Yeah. They are designed to last 20 to 25 years, like all amps, filter caps are. But the voltage in a solid state amp is typically a lot lower than the voltage in a tube amp. So if you're talking about 35 volt caps, they tend to last a lot longer than 450 volt caps. It's just you know, the nature of the beast. But eventually all caps, all electrolytic caps must be replaced. I have a 65 Vibrolux. Good on ya. Hey, Tommy. I want to reduce the noise floor. I'll be installing shielded cable. Okay. I'll also need to replace some carbon comp resistors. Is it possible to bake them at low temperature to remove moisture? I don't know if that's going to do much good. Might buy you some short-term. This is kind of sort of, I mean, it's true, but it's kind of sort of overstated. But think of it like a sponge. Once the moisture gets into it, it's like it opens up its pores. So as soon as it's just kind of be taking more moisture in as soon as it can. I think if you have a Vibrolux Reverb or Vibrolux that needs new plate resistors because the old ones are noisy, I would put new carbon comps in or carbon films if you can't get the carbon comps. But I would not try to dry out the old ones and reuse them. I think once they're gone, they're gone. It's just the nature of the beast. Think of it like, as they come from the factory, they're not supposed to be sponges. Over time, they become sponges. Once they're sponges, they're sponges. They're going to up humidity. And a lot of old carbon comps and fenders, you'll heat up an eyelet. And even when heat shrinking the lead, sometimes just stuff bubbles out of the resistor. And you know that stuff is not supposed to be outside of that resistor. Once that begins to happen, that resistor is gone. But the main thing, look at all my vintage fenders playlist, is making sure that you get all the DC out of the board. A lot of people start changing parts when the issue is noise in the board, because those boards are also sponges. But once you get all the moisture out of those boards, it can be decades before it builds back up. What is the historical reason UK and US have different voltages? I'm not quite sure. Other than the Brits and the Americans always want to be very similar, except in very odd ways. And we both of us take a lot of pride in deliberately being slightly different. From the rest of the world's perspective, we're interchangeable. It's like my view of Vermont and New Hampshire. You know, if you live there, there's a big difference. To the rest of us, like, they're in the Vermont, New Hampshire thing. I'm sure the rest of the world sees us in the UK similar ways, or they have historically. You know, who knows how the hell anyone's looking at us right now. But some of it also came down to Edison patents in the United States, and Tesla, which was taken over by Westinghouse patents and all that fun stuff. Interestingly, in the UK, there was no standard until the late 50s. Some places, some towns and cities had DC power. Other towns and cities had AC power. And by the end of the 50s, they were standardizing that. One of the reasons that the AC30 is AC is that this was a new thing, that they could sell an amp that was powered by AC that would work everywhere in England. This was 1958, 59 when this thing was designed. Before that, some cities had DC, some cities had AC, some cities had this voltage, some cities had this voltage, all that stuff. It was designed, AC was promoted. The AC30 was a big promotion because this was a safe way. You were less likely to get killed by your amplifier because AC was so much safer than DC, which is something that Edison and Tesla / Westinghouse had out here in the 1880s. But I am not an expert on the history of the power companies in both companies. I know what I just said is accurate, but I can't imagine it's the whole story. But it is fascinating that the UK had so many competing local utilities with the competing concepts of what the utilities should be. Though again, the war was absolutely hell for them. So, what's my opinion on Mesa California tweet apps? Yeah, yours feels blah meh. Yeah, dump, sell it to someone who's impressed by the Mesa branding and buy an amp instead. Do I have a few preferred bass amp recommendations? Well, the Geddy Lee route, solid state, plus maybe a good tube DI is a really valuable thing. It depends on your playing conditions. A lot of the guys playing at that kind of level also have in-ear monitors and their own monitor mixer. But if you need to hear yourself on stage against the drums in real time, I think the Aguilar stuff, the Tone Hammer series, might be the best way to go for most players these days. It's fairly reliable, it's fairly inexpensive because it's Class D. Not heard a lot of horror stories about the reliability of whatever power module they're using, and they sound really good. If I were doing that, that's probably what I'd do. Back when I was playing bass and trying to play bass live, I had a QRC QSC. I had a QSC 1,000-watt mono solid state amp, and a power amp, and I had a Sans amp PSA something or other, and I had a tuner, and then I had a PV 4x10 where I disconnected the tweeter. I wanted to get a 2x12, but I never got around to getting that. But that little PV sounded good with the 410s. With the tweeter disconnected, that was a good sounding bass rig. But, you know. Let's see. Thanks, Rob Platt. Just happen to have 69, maybe 70 deluxe reverb on the bench right now. I'm very glad. You know, cleaning up the lead dress is so much of the work. You know, thank you very much. It's unless you do it, which you're doing it right now, it's hard to explain to someone that, yeah, I can make your amp sound great. It's going to be really boring, almost janitorial things I'm doing. I'm not installing Mojo. I'm not installing Magic. I'm not doing anything difficult. I'm doing something right. And that's what it all comes down to, whether it's a Fender or a Marshall style or whatever. Just do it right. Get all the fundamentals right. And it's a lot of little boring things to do in sequence. At the end of it, the fucking thing keeps, it's like it's telling itself to be aligned at the bottom, and it moves itself up when someone types a lot. Anyway, it's so simple. You know, it's simple things done again and again and again. And whether it's 3 things you change or 100 things you change, each one of them in itself is simple. Each thing you do has to be done with the same intent. Let's see. Which amp might I have played through as a young buck and enjoyed that I would now consider a piece of crap? Well, my JC120. The Gorilla I started with, but I thought it was a piece of crap at the time. Had a Fender Stage 85. I don't know, it'd be usable these days, but I thought I was going to be Eric Clapton when I got that thing. Well, in comparison to that Gorilla, it was but I haven't had too many bad amps. I even had a Vox Valvetronics BT120 for a good long while. I got some really good sounds out of that thing. Totally solid state, modeling, kind of, sort of, if you look at it right. Man, Brock, you've got to have, if your bias caps were going bad, you'd probably be drawing too much current. But no way, it's possible that your bias cap, your electrolytic, is going bad, and so you're not generating as much voltage on the other side of the diode as normal. It's also possible that you're, well, no, that's still work against it. If you, depending on the circuit, if you've got a limiting resistor before the diode in the bias supply, it may be too large. It may have increased in value, and so your bias range isn't right. But you're measuring 30 volts, but 30 volts would be with some kind of current being drawn. I'd have to have your amp in front of me. There's got to be something simple, but I don't know that I can tell you based on the information I've had here. That's an odd issue to have. I would suggest do this. Power the amp on for 5-10 minutes. Measure the voltage at the screen plate and the grid. Power the amp off. Take the output tubes out. After the tubes cool off, take them out. Power it back on, and measure it again. Just the grid. So you don't have to keep it. You can keep it in standby. Just see if the grid voltage is different with the tubes present, without the tubes present. Should be slightly different, but not a lot, because amp being in standby or not. Yeah, and Brad's got a real good point. Check your heater voltage. Make sure that your tubes are heating all the way up. You could have a crappy connection at the very first connection from the heaters to the octals, and then both octals will have, or all 4 octals, depending on the amp, could have be losing, just not ever getting warm enough to draw enough current. Very good. Oh, you figured out ground issue on a filter cap. Yeah. Okay, that'll do it. I wouldn't expect to have a ground issue on a filter cap cause that symptom, but apparently it did. I believe you. Grounds is crucial. Andrew Henderson wants a K-Yeri nylon string. They're pretty things. For my uses, I'd be happy with just a little Yamaha. But yeah, the Yeri Alvarez stuff is great. I always found the K-Yeri stuff. It was a heater voltage thing. Okay, that makes more sense. That makes more sense to me than the ground on a filter cap. Very good, Brock. Awesome. What was your heater voltage out of curiosity, Brock? But there's something, the way that the Yaris were addressed, just cosmetics never appealed to me, but they're beautiful guitars and really well-made instruments. Let's see. Now we're to where we were at the last stream, last intermission. So let's see if anything else I need to absolutely have to grab before we wrap this up, because I've got Valentine's night stuff to do with Nikki. I don't know about RCD components. Arcol should be okay. Just don't spend more than you're comfortable spending. Carbon comps aren't all that. Yeah, Brock, what was your heater voltage? I assume that you already checked your heater voltage because you said all the voltages were good. See, that's what happens when I take you seriously. But yeah, if your tubes aren't heating, they're not going to draw all the current. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. Any practical reason or advantage? I would use true point-to-point wiring, meaning a combination of well laid out direct component soldering with a few terminal strips. I would never use them. I don't see any reason to. Some kind of board, whether it's turret or eyelet, is always going to be better for down the road fix repairs. And repairs are just a constant. You can't make an amp that will not need to be repaired. And it is so much better than terminal strips. And you can have a much neater layout. And I loathe true point-to-point stuff. It is crazily valued by people who've never had to repair anything, and by people who ascribe magic to electronics. Electronics has zero magic, absolutely 0% magic in electronics. It's always boring things like physics and science and math, and just hey, if this thing has this much mass and the leads are this long because you're doing point to point, it's going to be prone to vibrations. Whereas if there's this much mass and the leads are going to a board right there, it has no vibrations or so minuscule that it won't be a factor. Hey, John Pardo, returning V2 by V30 cab you had on loan. Okay. Home use, loud looking empty cabin fitting 1x12 GH and 112 GM. Any thoughts? Hey, if a G12H30 and a greenback are historically a good combination, go for it and see what you think. It can be a very different sound than the vintage 30, very different mid-range response. So if you have a chance to go someplace and play those speakers before you buy them, make sure that you know what you're getting. We're surrounded by G12H30s, well, especially greenbacks and vintage 30s, but you can find them to audition first. It is a good sound, but it may not be the good sound for you. But they do pair well together. Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. You didn't need to do that, Brad. I'll have to give it back to you in your next stream. We keep trading things. Hey, Shell. Thank you for putting up with our boy Brad there. All right, I am way behind the stream, and I need to get to the end of this. These 3 hours go by pretty quick. Hey, Harry Finley. Oh, I will have to check for that. Sorry, you don't have to. Sorry that I haven't seen it. I've not seen a crate VC in the email, but I will check. It is hard to keep up with the emails these days, but I will look for it. The answer is probably going to be no, due to the number of amps I already have coming in and the amps that are already in. But I'll look at your email and see. But the vintage Club series are pretty good amps. The main issue is some of them, it's really hard to get the chassis out of the cabinet. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I know I'm skipping some questions. Otherwise, I'll never get caught up. So, let's see. Lucky gem quote of the day right there. Anything can be magic if you're ignorant enough. Hey, man, we're not supposed to talk about politics on this channel, right? No politics on here. Ugh. All right. This time I'm going to remember to push this button before the very end. I'm supposed to, I have my producer, me, in different brain set all this up. So I'm supposed to do this, then I'm supposed to do that. And it makes it look like it's all a smooth running show out there in TV land for you guys. And I always forget to hit the buttons until the very end. All right. Well, I'm glad that Michelle got to sleep in on a rainy Sunday morning. And I appreciate everyone here. I'm pretty sure there are more than 5 thumbs up, so that I don't I don't sweat that. I know that some people like things and some people just never get around to it. And I also know some people may be watching this on their TV and it's really hard to figure out how to do it on their app or whatever. But yeah, but 5 likes would be an old like. You must have been here early in the stream, because I know I have at least 6. Because I had my entire family give me likes. I wonder if like farming is really a thing. Anyway, if you could give me a like, I appreciate it. I won't tell you to give me a subscribe because I know that you're already all subscribers. So thank you very much. But before I do go, I have noticed a huge decline in views in the last week. And I'm just wondering if I'm sure it's an algorithm thing. My stuff has been shown to fewer people for some reason by YouTube. But seriously, it's like a large percentage drop in views in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And I don't think that I've gotten appreciably worse or even very different in that couple weeks. I don't want to get into the membership thing, because that's something I've got to allocate and keep track of. And I can't even, I'm trying to think of things I could do to offer people for a patron kind of thing. But I can't think of anything extra to give people in return for that. So I've not done that because I'd just be taking advantage of people's money. But if you could go back and watch check, if you watched any of my videos in the last 2 weeks and you liked them, but didn't like them, it helps. Give me a like. I don't give you midstream ads. I don't give you mid-roll ads. There are channels that would have an ad every 2 minutes, and I'm not one of them. So, fins are always allowed for toilet humor, because you can say toilet, but I can't say it in Finnish. And with that, we will finish.